Hello guys, I want to welcome you guys back to another set of tutorials. This is actually a really great one. This is close to my heart. It's about building multiplayer games in Canvas with socket.io and nodejs, all within the browser. I'm a huge web guy, so we're going to go ahead and get started with a tutorial series, a couple, maybe 3 or 4 videos long, just kind of showing you it's not going to be a really great game. Games are really complicated. So this is just gonna be a very basic game just to get you started and going with how to use socket.io. Maybe if you're not familiar with Node.js, if you're not familiar with Canvas as well. So you get comfortable with a little bit of all the aspects and you get to see what it actually takes to build a multiplayer game, which is a very different world than just a single player game. There's a lot more pieces. So we're gonna get started here. Hopefully we can get a lot done in this first video. First thing we're going to do is create an index. Index.html is what I wanted. Index.html. Okay. And if you hit the exclamation point and tab, it should build out your HTML. I'm using VS Code. I used to use Sublime. I've used Atom, but I like VS Code the most out of all of them personally. But it's up to you. We're just going to call this a multiplayer game. I believe most editors should do that with the exclamation point thing. All right, so then we're gonna build out a canvas here. And if you do hashtag game, that'll add the ID. This is based off of Emmet. Emmet is built into VS Code. So if you don't have Emmet in Sublime, you can actually go install it as a plugin, and then you can get these. So we got our canvas here, and the first thing I like to do usually is just add a little bit of style and make it look nice. So one thing is HTML and body, remove the margin because there's always a margin. I like to set a nice little black, a little darker color background. And what I'm going to do is display flex. I love flex. This way we can align the canvas directly in the center of the page. Then we're going to do align items center and justify content center. Align items is a vertical alignment and justify content is horizontal alignment. So it aligns everything in the body in HTML tag to the center. Then the last thing we need to do is do height of 100% because body doesn't default to 100%. So it would only align everything in the center horizontally because of justify content since it doesn't maintain the entire height of the page. Then the last thing I want to do is canvas and give it a background of black. Okay, and if I right click on this, I can open my default browser and I can see that it's there. Now, my canvas, I'm going to make this a width of 800 and a height of 600. And if we go back to the page, refresh it, you see it's a lot bigger. I'm going to close this out because we're not going to be really working with the index.html page itself. We're going to build a server now to load that page for us. Now, I like ES6 a lot. So everything I'm going to do is basically ES6 related. So I'm going to call it app.mjs. And MJS is for module JavaScript. And that's where Node doesn't have default import capabilities. I love to use the import. So if you name it MJS, you can use Node's experimental module flag to run any MJS files with import in them. Okay, so we're going to start out, we're going to import some modules here. We're going to import Express from Express. If you're not familiar with Express, it's an MVC. It just allows us to really create the server basically and host pages. Well, there's a lot more you can do with it, but I just use it for the most part, just very simply. We're going to import HTTP, and this is just mainly for socket.io. It has to have the HTTP create server. It's kind of a weird way of going about it, but I'm going to import socket.io from socket.io. And then I'm also import path, and this is for a trick that has to deal with the ES6 imports. Since ES6 import doesn't have dir name, by default we have to create our own dir name, and dir name is used for for static paths. Basically, it defines the path from your root directory up until whatever directory this is in, which is called multiplayer game vids. If you're not familiar with Node.js, I would suggest go get familiar with that. You'll see more of what I'm talking about. So const app equals express. Okay, so we're creating our express server, and then we're going to create our server, http.create server, and we're going to pass an app, our express server, into it, and then we're going to bring in IO equals socket IO dot, oops, sorry, not dot, and then we're going to pass in our server to that. Then here's the tricky thing with dir name. We have to create our own. Don't have to really understand what this is doing. It's not a big deal. We're going to resolve, sorry, it's not resolver, it's resolve path.dir name decode. I had to look this up online, by the way, so it's not something you just know by default. URL import .meta .url dot path name. Okay, so this will create our dir name for us. It's just resolving this long trashy screen or string here of the path name of everything, creating a URL out of it. So the next thing we're going to do is server.listen. We're going to listen on port 3000, and this has a callback function. Just to know that we're running, we're going to log it. Server listening on port 3000. Okay, so if I press Control tilde, I bring up my terminal just so I know everything's working. You do node and then experimental module. I believe that's what it was. app.mjs. Sorry, experimental modules. So can't find module express. At least that's a good sign. It just says we don't have the module express there. So I like to use Yarn. Of course, most people use npm to install modules. I have Yarn, and to get that, you just do npm I tag g, which is install globally Yarn, and now you can use it as a command here. But Yarn add express, this will actually, if it doesn't recognize your package.json file, it'll build one for you. So my package.json file, I have dependencies with express in it. So otherwise, npm install doesn't actually create the package.json file. And even if the package.json file is there, it does not add the dependency. You have to add the flag save to be able to even put it in here. But this is good for just installing all your dependencies and knowing what is in your project. The next thing we're going to do is yarn add socket.io, because that's another thing we're using. Okay, you see it added it here. We'll close the package.json. We should have all of our packages, and we do node experience. Actually, if I just press up, I got it right there. So server is listening on port 3000. Good. We're not throwing any errors. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a thing called nodemon, which is really nice. It watches your server files for any changes and then restarts the server, because otherwise you have to keep killing the server and restart every time you change the server. So you can do the same thing, npm I tag g install, or with nodemon, npm I tag g nodemon, and that'll install nodemon in your global space. Then you can use it here. So nodemon experimental flags app.js, and that'll run the nodemon server. Now you can see if I make a change and I save it, it restarts, which is really nice. Now, the next step I'm going to do from there, actually, I'm going to take this one step further, is I'm going to put this in my package.json. You can just make a scripts property here, and this is an object, and usually I just do start. That way, you can do npm start or yarn start, and that'll run that command. And you can put any commands in here that you want. You can even run other scripts in here as well. There, now I got everything running. What we're going to do is we're just going to serve up our page real quick. First things we're going to do is app.use express.static dir name plus /. Now, what this does is it allows us to have static content at basically our root directory. And the way that works is if I create a new folder called JS here, and let's say I have a new file in here, main, and just to keep a consistency, we're going to have main.mjs. Then in my in my index.html, I can import that with my script tag. If I pass in source here, it adds that. Then I'll do js/main.mjs. And just to make sure it's working, I can alert hi. Now, right now, we're not serving up this page on our server, so we actually have to add that as well. So to do that, we do app.get, and this is just the /, then a function here with request response object here, and we're just going to response.send file. We got to use dir name again with the concatenation here /index.html. So send file, it has to be camel case, so remember that F is capitalized. This is the request and response object. Happens on every time you go to just the /, which is just a root. If I go to localhost :3000, this is what's gonna happen. It's gonna send me a file of index.html, which is this guy. So let's go ahead and save it. You see the server restarts. Come back here. I have localhost 3000. Hit refresh, and then the page is loaded. Now, our JavaScript did not run. If you press Command Option J, you'll see that just loads up, and it was 404 not found. So I think I mistyped it. I did mistype it. So main.mjs, and we got our alert. Hi. All right. So we are moving along here. The next thing we're going to do in our app is we're just going to set up our sockets. So we're going to do io.on connection. And this takes a callback function as well, passing in socket. We're just going to log socket.id, see what the ID is. Nothing is happening right now. We can refresh, and we are logging. Exactly. We have actually connected to the socket. To get this accessible in our client, though, we have to do const socket equals io. Now we have socket available in our client, and this will allow us to emit messages to our server. So with the way socket.io works, or any sockets in general, or WebSockets, is it's open connection between the client and the server. The server can push data down to the client can push data to the server. It's open connection. It's not a request response based system. All right, going back to our server here, I'm gonna create a couple things here just for our game. So I'm gonna have a list of players. Now, the way this works is when they first connect, I'm going to init down stuff. I'm going to emit an event called init, and I'm going to pass in an object. I'm going to pass an ID because we want to have the ID from our socket. And I'm going to call this players, which is our players. So I'm going to pass basically all of our players that are in our game. I'm going to pass them down. Anyone who jumps on the server, they're going to get a list of all the current players, and then they're going to get their own ID. So then on the client, we can create a new player with their ID. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is in our main.js here is now that we got our socket, I'm going to create a canvas. Canvas equals document.get element ID game, and then ctx is canvas dot get context 2D, and this is our context basically. So just to know that we got things working, I'm going to do const. I'm going to build a function here, const write to canvas, and this is a function, takes a message. And we're going to do ctx.fill style equals white. We'll make the color white. ctx.font equals 20 pixels. And ctx.fill text message. And then this next two properties are the X and Y position. So we're going to put at 30 pixels and 30 pixels. Okay. So socket.on init, which is what we're sending down from the server, as soon as we connect, it's going to emit down to us the init event. And you remember we're getting ID and players. Now I just did destructuring. This is just putting the object here. It breaks apart the object into two variables here. And this is a function here. And then all I want to do is write to canvas connected, just to see that we're connected and we got our stuff. And we refresh. IO is not defined. Oh. Sorry, I'm not even including it. Script source /socket.io/socket.io.js. We have to include the IO, socket.io here. So if I refresh here, we got connected. We're drawing it onto the screen. Yay. All right, enough of that. We want to have a similar thing here. We're going to have let players equals an array. And then we want to create our player. And what we're going to do is actually we're going to create a player class. Instead of just building up something here, we're going to create a player class, player.mjs, and class player, and we're going to do constructor. And we're going to have an ID, we're going to have X, we'll set it equal to 10 as a default, Y, we'll set that equal to 10 as well, width is equal to 50, height equals 50, and color equals white. Okay, now we just got to set these on the class. These are all the properties that we're going to have every time we create a new player. Now, these equal signs are just defaults. So if I pass an X into this constructor, well, then it's going to ignore 10 and accept whatever I pass it. So these are all just defaults I can have. That way I don't have to do any other extra code on here. So this x equals X, this y equals Y, and so on. We got to basically have them all onto the class themselves. I'm also going to give this a speed, because we've got to have a speed, you know. This ID equals ID, this color equals color, and this is moving. And this is an object. This will define whether or not we're moving and what direction we're moving in, because we can move right and down at the same time, which will give us that angle. We can move at angles. Okay. Now, and I'm going to create a draw function here, and it's going to take the context. And so what I want to do is if this is moving dot right, this dot x plus equals this dot speed. So if we're moving right, then we're going to add whatever our speed is, which in this case it's 10, to our x value. This is before we draw anything, so we're actually going to move all our coordinates and then draw the player at that coordinate. So I'm going to copy this a few times down because we want to have up, down, left, and right. We can move all of our coordinates this way. So if I'm moving left, then our x is minus the speed. If we're going up, we want to move the y. Now, for those of you who don't know Canvas, Canvas starts 0 zeros right here. So X goes up as it goes across the canvas. Y goes up as it goes down the canvas. So this will be 0. The canvas is 600 pixels tall. At the bottom, Y equals 600. So if we're moving up, then we're actually subtracting from Y, because we're going to go up this way, which is going towards the 0. So we're going to subtract the speed. And if we're going down, then we're going to add to our y. Oops, sorry, that's already there. So we're adding to our y. Then we're going to draw our character. ctx.begin path. It's always good to do begin path before you draw anything, because it resets whatever fill styles and all that stuff. So ctx.fill style, we're going to say this.color. So we're going to set the color for ourselves. And then ctx.fill rect. This.x, this.y, this.width, and this.height. And fill rect takes 4 properties, x, y, width, and height. And the way Canvas works, it's not like object oriented. It's actually more procedural than anything. So if you want to have another box below that, you can do ctx.fill style equals red, and then ctx.fill style equals pink, and then, but you have to draw whatever you want in between these fill styles to get that color. So you do ctx.fill rect 10, 10, 10, 10, or whatever. And if you copy this down here, 10, 10, 10, 10. Or let's do this at 20, or let's say that's a little bit longer here, 30. So then you'll see that the color of our player is whatever color we defined in our class, which is white, unless we pass in a different color. Then any squares afterwards is just all the colors that defined immediately beforehand. So in our main.js, what we're going to do is we're going to create a function called draw. I just like arrow functions, which is why I do it this way. You don't have to do it this way. So first thing we got to do is we have to clear rect. And we're going to clear it at 0, 0. Width is the canvas.width, which it likes to auto set that, and canvas.height. This will clear out the canvas. You have to clear out before you draw anything every single frame. Otherwise, you'll see the square just moving across the screen, and you keep adding more and more squares, and nothing. It won't look like it's moving. I mean, it will, but it keeps filling up. Then what we want to have is all of our players out for each. And we'll just do v.draw. This is ES6 syntax for each player. We're going to call the draw method. Then what we're going to do is request animation frame draw. And request animation frame, that's built into JavaScript. It's just saying that when the screen actually redraws this screen, when this screen is ready to be drawn again, go ahead and draw your canvas again. So that way the timing is in sync. Otherwise, if you use set timeout or even a set interval, you might miss frames. And you don't want to miss frames in this. So we're not doing an interval. Normally games would be done in an interval. A lot of people create tutorials with intervals of 1000 divided by 60, which is 60 frames per second. We don't actually have a frames per second in this way, but it is the cleanest way to draw on the screen. Now, we don't have anything in our players here. We're getting ID and players from our server. What we're going to do is, first thing is we have to bring in our player class. So import player from /player.mjs. Now, this is not like, if you guys ever use like React or any other framework that does importing, a lot of times they allow you to omit this extension here. That's not default in JavaScript. That's their own version using Webpack or whatever package manager they have to set that up for you. But you always have to add the extension. If you get used to it, it's not so bad. I used to have real big problems with this. But so we got our player here. And all we want to do is create a player here equals new player. And we're just going to pass in the ID. We don't care. We can have the X and Y, width and height being all default, but we do want the ID coming from the server, which is the socket ID. If you remember socket ID, we're going to pass that down, socket.emit. We want that ID on our player class. Now, what we're going to do is immediately we're going to do socket.emit new player. And we're just going to pass in our player. This way, we're going to emit to the server our new player, and then we're going to have our server broadcast to everyone else that they've got a new player. And so they'll add that there. Now, we're going to redefine our players array here. Players equals players dot map. So we're going to loop over all of our players. Since these are just plain objects, we want them to have the class. We want them to have the whole class so that they have the methods and everything, you know, the draw method, and they can move and stuff like that. So we're going to map over our players array coming from our server, and we're going to set new player v, pass in the whatever object comes there, and then we're going to go ahead and concat our player. So we're going to have it, this will return an array of players with the new player class, passing in the object that comes from the server out of the array. And then we're going to add, concat, add on to that array our player that we created locally. So now our players has our local player and all the server players. Then on top of this emitting here, we're also going to create the on. Usually when you emit, you're also going to listen at the same time. And this will have a new player, and then this will have the player object here. And all we're going to do is players.push new player object. Now, the reason we did this is because this object that comes from the server is just a plain object. It's going to be basically all the properties off of our player. So methods and everything else does not get passed to the server. By passing this player class, which is a new class, really all I'm going to be passing are these properties, because methods do not get passed. Now, when that comes back down from the server, I want to have a new player. I want to have the class and just pass in the object. We'll create a new class. This looks a little bit confusing. So what happens is I'm emitting to the server. I got a new player. And then I haven't written the server implementation just yet, and I'm going to show you in a second. But the server is going to take it from you and then emit to all the other players, everyone but you, that there's a new player. So this script will run on those other machines, not your machine. So in here, do socket.on, since you're emitting from the client to you, new player. And that's going to have the object. And then we're going to do socket.broadcast.emit new, sorry about my keyboard, player object. And what this is doing is when you log in or when you open the page up, you're going to emit your player object to the server through right here. You're emitting. The server is going to be like, all right, I'm listening for when you emit new player. I'm going to get your player object, and then this is a function. This is an arrow function, as we've been doing all the time. And then I'm going to broadcast. You are going to broadcast. Your socket is going to broadcast to everyone else, emit, that there's a new player and pass in your object. So then on their machines, this will run. So that'll add them to their players list. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and save this, and let's just see if it runs. Unexpected identifier, main 1. Oh, so I completely forgot, actually, is you can't just do regular script tags if you're going to use the module format. Module format is with import. By the way, import right now, unfortunately, only works with Chrome, and you can look at can I use. And we'll just add import here. So unfortunately, it's not, well recommended to use import since it only works with Chrome. It works with a lot of older versions of Chrome. And people are slow to adapt this. I don't understand why, but it works for Opera actually and Opera Mobile and some of these other browsers here. But big browsers like, IE, Firefox doesn't even support it, and Safari doesn't support it. Not too many people support it. So if you're trying to do this game and you're not on Chrome, then I would suggest do it a different way. And you can just do regular scripts, and then in the node server you can do require. So it's not a big deal. All right. So you have to set type equals module. So it did not like import at first. It's an unexpected identifiers. So now, sorry, our import is actually incorrect here. It's not /player. Oh, wait, it is /player. Why do you not like it? Does not provide an export. So we're not providing an export. This is why I got to read error messages. So in my player class, you also have to export. So we're going to export default player. So we're going to export the player class. Okay, so we got no errors, but nothing's drawing on the screen. So let's see why. Oh yeah, we didn't call this method draw yet. Basically, we didn't start it. So once we start it, cannot property begin path undefined. I got to pass in CTX to our draw method like we were expecting. Draw CTX, right. And we got our player, and we got these little cubes drawn here too as well. I don't really care about those cubes. They're not really part of what we're trying to do. So I'm going to delete those and just have our player. Awesome. We have our player. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is move the player because nothing's happening. We can't do anything. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a controls file here. And this will have all of our controls. So first thing I'm going to do is export default. And this is going to be a function. And I'm going to pass in the player. And then I'm also going to pass in socket because eventually I want to emit stuff. So every time we move, we want to emit to the server saying that we moved. And then we want the server to broadcast to all the other clients that we've moved. So document dot on key down equals E. If you're not familiar with this is intro JavaScript stuff, just a on key down for the document. We're going to create a dir for direction. And if I've already mapped out these key codes, so there's websites out there that map them all out for you, or you can console log them. It's up to you. If e.keycode equals 68, which is actually D, dir equals right. If e dot, let's just copy this down. Actually, we want 4 directions. We're going to have down, which is 83. And then 65 as left. And 87 is up. So if the key code that we press equals any of these numbers, then we're going to have a direction. And what we want to do is player.move dir. We don't have a move method on our player just yet. We're going to add that here in a second. And then we're going to emit it to the socket, or to our server anyways. We're going to just say move player dir. Okay, now what we got to do is we can't just have on key down, we have to stop the player too. So document to on key up, we're going to stop whatever direction we're moving with that. So same thing. I'm just going to copy this here because we want pretty much almost all of this the same, except for this, we want a stop method on our player. And instead of move player, we want stop player. So player needs a stop method and a move method. So move takes a dir, and then stop takes a dir. And if you remember, we just have this is moving object. It's really simple. We're just setting it true. So this dot is moving dir equals true. So we're just, if dir comes in as left, right, up, down, left, right, up, and down, we're just setting that property on the object to true. And then we're going to do the opposite for stop, just saying this dot is moving dir equals false. So that way, once you let go of any keys, all those are going to turn false, and you're not going to have any movement on our coordinates. Now, what we're going to do is we also have to listen to our events on our own client, and then we also have to listen to the events on the server. So just like here, when you emit new player, you also got to listen for it. We're going to do socket to on move player and socket to on stop player. Now, what this is going to come down with, when you emit to the server, it's all the same socket. We have the ID that's on that socket. We don't even have to get it from our player class. But when the other person gets our ID, they don't know which player it is. It could be 1,000 players. You know what I mean? So what we got to do is figure out which player is the one that's moving. So we're going to pass down ID and dir from our server. Then we want to do players.find, and this is a loop. This is kind of a new method to the array class that finds one object, kind of like filter, but filter returns an array. This returns the object itself. So we want to check the v.id equals ID, and then that's our player. We just want to move him at the dir. So we're just calling the move method on our player class of whatever player that we find in our array of players from the ID that comes from the server. And we want to do the same exact thing with stop, except instead of move, stop. Okay. So we want to bring in our controls here. We don't have them in here yet. So import controls from /controls. And it's not a class, so I don't capitalize. I only capitalize classes that need instantiated, which means a new keyword has to be applied. Anything else I always keep lowercase. So if you remember in our controls, we're going to pass in our player and our socket. Player and our socket. So in our main.js, we just got to pass in our player and our socket. So we'll just do controls, player, socket. Okay, now we have to set up these two events on the server. We'll just copy this over here and we'll bring it into our server here. So everything, all the socket events have to go within this IO on connection. That's where the socket is available. So on here, we're not going to do the players.find. We're not getting direction and ID. We're actually just getting the direction from the client. If you remember controls, we're just passing in dir here on emit move player and on emit stop player. So in our server here, we're just getting the direction. And what we want to do is socket.broadcast.emit move player. ID is our socket.id and dir. This is ES6. It just says that the property and the key, the value, key and the value are both dir. And we're going to do the same exact thing for stop. So this will broadcast to everyone but myself because I'm the one sending it from our client. I gotta hit stop here. All right. So now that we got that, if we refresh, controls 404 not found. Sorry, didn't add the extension here, MJS. So we got our player, and we are moving. Now we're missing another player here. And yeah, so. Oh, I gotta close this. I gotta make some room here. And we are almost there. Let's restart the server. Okay, so when you first log in, I started him first and then him second. So because I started him first, oh, there it is. Nope, that's another new socket. Oh yeah, so I'm not adding new player. I'm not adding it to my players array. So when you first sign in, you're not going to get, sorry, this server. New player. I still have to add this object here to my players array. So let me go ahead and do that. Because on the server, it has to have all your players. That push object here. All right. Now we got that guy moving and this guy's moving as well. And we got some extra stuff there. A little bit of cleanup, but overall we got a player. We're moving. We're networked. Really nice. And that concludes step 1. I want to thank you guys for watching. Continue watching for the rest of the game.